The 3Fs in street photography is the subject today. First mentioned by
Matt Stewart.
That's Stewart, where from Magnum. Great photographer, but widely accepted now. But I thought we'd talk about them today.
Yeah.
So what are the 3Fs, Flavio?
So the 3Fs are fishing, following. The third one is fuck, and we'll explain that why that is called that way. Let's start with fishing.
Fishing, yeah. I think
it's the one that we use the most in our own photography, the fishing technique.
I'd say I almost exclusively use fishing as a technique in street photography. And fishing, it's when you find the background, you select the background that you want to have in your photograph, and then you wait for the right subject to come into it.
Yeah.
And I always akin it to studio photography. You know, and if you're a studio photographer, you've got your studio and you get different sorts of clients come in throughout the day, and at some point you get this amazing family or couple come in and they're really into photography, and you get some great shots. And it's kind of the same with street photography. You know, you select this background and then you've got to wait for the right subjects to come into it, and probably 90% of the subjects that come through that background during the time that you're fishing
won't be right,
and it just will look awful. But if you wait, and that's the other big thing in street photography, you need to wait if you're fishing.
Patience is fundamental. Yeah.
Absolutely. At some point the right person or the right set of circumstances will come together, and you'll be rewarded for it. So that's fishing.
Yes. And one thing that is very important to think about is if you start looking through some of the legendary photographers from Magnum that we mentioned, because Matt Stewart was a Magnum candidate that didn't end up entering, but if you look at the Magnum legendary photographers, you look at National Geographic legendary photographers, Sam Abel, Albert Allard, and similar. Most of them use the fishing technique. Most of their shots are done with the fishing technique.
In fact, the doyen of street photography, Cartier-Bresson, he's waited in a scene, particularly, the one of the most famous shots is the bike going round the sort of the corner, and
that is a typical fishing technique.
Yeah, he's waited there because he could have waited there before, and like a single person would have walked around, or a group of 5 or 6 people, and all their heads would have been clashing, etc. But he's waited for the right person. In fact, he probably he knew what he was waiting for, a cyclist to come round there.
Yeah, he pre-visualized it.
Yeah, and then when it comes round, he's been rewarded for his visualization.
Yes. The pre-visualization is one thing that will help you a lot with the fishing technique. It will just get you to understand exactly what you can get out of a certain scene, of a certain environment. And I think it has a high reward, let's say, ratio, the fishing technique, because you already have something going on when you set yourself up. You just need to wait for the right subject, and when you're really, really lucky, everything will come together. And then we get on to the following technique. The following technique is a way to reverse the fishing technique. So you see the subject first, and you realize the subject is not in a good background, in a good environment or scene. You need something more to reinforce the picture. And what you do, you either go in front of the subject, try to come parallel to the subject, often on the street, trying to select the background, or you just follow the subject for a while in a not in a dodgy way, but you just follow the subject and just select the background where the subject might happen onto and get the shot that way.
I think you've got to be really careful when you're following someone, because you don't want to be looking like you're stalking them.
Absolutely.
And you do it from the other side of the road, and don't keep looking at them. Just be aware of where they are, and keep looking ahead until you find.
A great way is that you follow them, keeping them in the corner of your eye, and you keep on scanning for the right scene or background too.
I mean, it's not a technique that I use massively. In fact, I don't use it that often at all. But the last time I used it was on the Queen's Jubilee.
Yeah,
and we were together,
up now,
and we saw this really colourful character, all dressed out in sort of regalia for the Jubilee, and his dog was as well. And we followed him. We just followed and waited until we found the right background. And lo and behold, ahead of me, I saw this red car, and also the house behind it had a reddish door, and just thought that's absolutely ideal. And there was just enough space in between the two cars that when he walked along, I could kind of capture him. So, I saw this and waited there, and
we were shooting together at that time.
Yeah.
What we did actually, it was a bit conspicuous because it was the two of us following.
Yeah.
But what we did actually wasn't to follow him. We were parallel to him or in front of him.
Yes.
We were just trying to wait for him. But still, yeah. This I remember following this man on Oxford Street in London. He was a poor man, pretty bent forward and bent completely on the side, like windswept. And he was just walking pretty briskly. And I kept on walking not far from him, trying to find the right scene. And was just finding reflections when he looked like two brackets. It was just quite interesting. And then he just entered the shop and the scene was gone. But
sure.
It took me some time. Didn't get the shot. But that was a typical thing that you would try to do. But you just need to be careful not to stalk people.
And then the final F?
Final F is a typical situation that many photographers find in street photography. Something happens in front of you. A scene just all of a sudden appears. You're around a corner and you just see something that you have to be really ready to take. You have to have your camera ready. You have to be very quick with your responses. So what you do, you first thing, you utter fuck, otherwise the technique doesn't work, and you just bring the camera up and shoot the scene. And that's why it's just that sudden moment where you really have to be ready to react.
And I think this is where you've excelled a lot with your Leica camera in these sorts of situations.
Yes,
because you're using a Leica M10 and you pre-focus it because it's a manual focus, and you just shoot.
Yeah, the only thing you have to do is to frame it and shoot it.
Yeah. And it's even difficult with an autofocus camera, to get it that quickly. That's where the Leica really, really excels. You've got it preset.
Yes. And
you just lift it up and shoot.
Yes.
Don't think about it.
Yeah. And it is something that really can work. But talking about the autofocus cameras, that's where you really have to be proficient with your camera. You really have to. You need to know it. You need to know how your autofocus works. You need to know how to focus recompose very, very quickly. And it's one technique that a friend of mine uses that uses autofocus cameras is to simply focus on the ground at a distance that is roughly the one he knows he wants to shoot at, and then while raising the camera he doesn't have to focus again. He simply just shoots.
Yeah, I've done that many a time. I pre-focused. In fact, one of the shots that we can also put up is the one in Soho with the guy outside the sex shop.
Yes.
And I pre-focused, that was like, fuck that, look at that in front of me. I pre-focused somewhere else and just went up and took it.
Yeah.
And then one shot and it was gone.
When I use an autofocus camera, I often do that. I just scan the scene. I position myself to where I want to be for the scene, pre-focus somewhere else so they don't see me just focusing with the camera to my eye, and then raise the camera. And it's a very good way to do it.
So, guys, that's the 3 Fs. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you very soon next week with the next episode from Shoot the Street. Give us a big thumbs up, subscribe, and it's goodbye from Mark and
Flavio. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.